Observe this, brother.
All right, here with Andrew Zarian, the Scoop Master. Also, my co-host on We're Live, Pal, with Denise Salcedo. And I figure whenever we mention the name Denise, we'll just have to throw this up there so that she's here with us.
Where's Denise?
Where's Denise? Man, I talked to you, gosh, it probably has been the first time we did an interview together. I don't know, maybe, I don't know if it's quite been a year, but it was on even before our podcast came to F4W Wrestling Observer. And then I've been on your show. So it's kind of like a little bit of a revisiting. Not that we haven't done shows recently, being that we do the show every Tuesday. But I wanted to bring you in this setting first because when we were thinking of what to name We're Live, Pal, one of the names that we both kind of tossed out there at the same time was Observe This.
Yeah.
And that Observe This line people who've seen this show before know that I ask everybody what they remember of that moment. But it goes back to that World War III pay-per-view where Hogan is burning what is supposed to be an observer, but might actually be a pro wrestling torch.
What do you
remember? Yeah, what do you remember of that moment?
So I saw that clip way after. So what year would that have been? 95, 94?
Yes.
Had to be 95.
Yep.
That's wild, right? You know, I have the worst short-term memory. But give me a random pro wrestling reference leading up to 2008, and I can tell you everything.
Yeah,
like my mind goes from like 87 to 2008, and then it just stops totally. I remember.
Well, okay, how old are your kids then?
So my daughter's going to be 6 in January. My son is 4.5.
Yeah, because my theory on that is like when you start your family, events and dates just. Like you just lose them. Anytime before you kind of get married and start the family, like you know everything.
Well, you know what happened? I kind of lost interest in wrestling until about 2011. For like 3 years, I was still following it, but I was like numb to it.
Yeah.
And then the whole CM Punk pipe bomb thing kind of reinvigorated my interest again in wrestling, and then it kind of turned into what we're doing today. But I have a real distinct memory of it because one of my cousins was a subscriber of the Observer, and that was the first time I ever heard of the Wrestling Observer, because I as a kid I remember seeing the wrestling magazines, but you couldn't go to like the smoke shop and see an issue of the Observer. You had to subscribe to it. But I knew the name Dave Meltzer because of my cousin. So this definitely is 95. So this is before the forums and the message boards and everything else. And he told me he's like Hulk Hogan set an issue of this, and he actually had a copy of the Observer, and he's like, Hulk Hogan just set this on fire, and he couldn't understand why. Like, I think he probably had to have been 19 or 20 at the time because his dad was a big fan. But I remember watching it. I'm like, this is so bizarre because that's such a bad guy thing to do. Like you're setting a copy of a magazine on fire and calling it, whatever he called it, a dirt sheet or tabloid or whatever he called it. And I was like, it was so out of character for the guy. Before that, you never saw Hogan do anything like that. It was just, Hulk Hogan. It was a cartoon. And then he's setting this thing on fire in like a garbage can, and Savage is there. And I think Sting came out, right?
Sting and Savage were both there.
Sting and Savage were there too. So I'm like, what a bizarre thing. But but him just going to Observe This, brother, always tickled me a little bit. I thought it was so hysterical because he's so unnatural. Like his promo delivery as a wrestler. I mean, obviously he's a natural wrestler. He's one of the greatest of all time. But he comes off so unnatural when he does his promos. To see him do something somewhat human, be emotional like that, it was fantastic. I absolutely loved it, and that's why I love the name.
So, I'd asked Dave about this moment, and he said he thinks Hogan actually had a pro wrestling torch, and that's what he was burning.
That makes it even better.
It makes it more funny.
Just another element on top of the Dave Meltzer, expose the business. Totally. That whole narrative is hysterical.
All right, so I led in the intro with this photo here, which is a really amazing photo in so many ways. And we kind of teased it a little bit on We're Live, Pal, when we were talking about Vegas and what was going on. But I mean, we didn't sit on it too long, but what was it like hanging out with Rob Van Dam, someone who you even said, you wore a t-shirt of when you were a kid and got in trouble at school.
Yeah.
What was it like hanging out with that dude you run clubs so that you are very comfortable in that environment. But Rob Van Dam, like that, it seems like home for him where you guys were. Like, what was it like hanging out with that guy?
Well, it's literally home because he goes there all the time.
Yeah.
Apparently, and I didn't know this. And he lives 10 minutes away. So he like rolled out of bed and like showed up in his like, his shorts and a tank top.
I mean, it kind of looks like he just rolled out of bed. So,
well, we rolled something else too, which is another highlight of my day that day. I gotta say, this whole thing. You brought up the fact that I interviewed you. You interviewed me like a little over a year ago.
Yeah,
I think
whatever
it was around WrestleMania time, whatever it was. From that point to today, this whole wrestling career portion of my life has really spiraled into something tremendous. And I say that last weekend and probably this coming weekend, if it ever just goes away, right? Like if I just can't do it anymore, or I'm not, just the show takes a turn, I would be so content with what I achieved in this. Like I would be very happy with the fact that the culmination to all of this was, going out, obviously with you guys doing Chicago is going to be a lot of fun with Brian and Dave and you, and Denise is going to be there. Everybody's going to be there. But the fact that where's Denise? The fact that 14-year-old me died inside a little bit, that I'm hanging out with Van Dam and I'm at this ridiculous pool day spa. It's a topless day spa with his, twerking wife. And I believe his girlfriend was also there. I believe they're in a throuple, which adds another level of insanity to the fun that was last week. For me, it was kind of surreal. Like you step back a little bit and you're like, okay, I'm doing this. I'm in the mode. But then you step back, you're like, you know what? This is pretty cool. This is a pretty cool portion of my career that I'm able to live at 37 years old. And age plays against you in this game of broadcasting and being a personality. So I'm enjoying every second of it. This has been so much fun for me. And when it's not fun, I'm done. That's it. I'm finished.
Yeah, I actually do want to ask you, in a little bit, I want to ask you a little bit more about kind of like the future of what you're doing. We'll save that.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the show that we do for F4W, which is, this is something that you and Denise are very comfortable in. How long have you been doing the Madmen video show?
So, I started podcasting late 2008, early 2009. I didn't start Madmen till late 2011. So, Pipe Bomb happened, right? Summer 2011, probably like September, mid-September-ish. Maybe we started playing around with the idea of doing this podcast because we were doing a comic book show where I was just producing, and Rich and his co-host Jonathan, not the Jonathan that produces our show, but it was a different guy. Him and John would do a comic book podcast called Behind the Counter. And I would always, I was producing it. So whenever they spoke about like Uncanny X-Men from the 80s and 90s, and whenever there was a wrestling reference, like my ears would perk up and I would like join in on the conversation.
Yeah.
So we kind of turned it into, hey, why don't we try to do a wrestling show? And it was a very different style show we were doing, and it kind of spiraled into this over the last, 10 years.
But it's always been a video show, right?
Always, yeah. From day one. Everything I did was started off with video first.
Which is not how a lot of this stuff happened. Like, if you go back to, and I always say that, Brian Alvarez is kind of, he's one of the pioneers of the industry. He's not the first person to do a podcast. He's not even the first person to do a wrestling podcast, but he created his business out of the audio stuff. Whereas the website had always been most important. The website, click on this to find news behind the paywall. And Brian was like, yeah, we'll have that. But these radio shows are actually the product. And so you doing video as early on as you did, like that was pioneering in a sense, because it was still podcast. Like most people were still podcasting, and you're doing, I don't know what you would have called it, video podcast or vlogging or whatever it was called back then, but it's a big thing to do video shows in 2011.
So the way that it started for me is that I have two really good friends that are stand-up comics. One is Tim Dillon. I think half the freaking world knows him now. His career's exploded with Rogan and everything he's doing. And my other good friend Kunal Aurora, I went to high school with Kunal, and he's a brilliant stand-up comic, great writer. And he's like, "Listen, you should do a podcast," because I've always been into radio. I grew up on Howard Stern, and I grew up. To be honest, I grew up listening to Dave and Brian on IATA. We've spoken about IATA multiple times.
Sure.
And I've always been a huge talk radio fan. I mean, that's really my passion. I work in nightlife and I work in hospitality, but radio was always my thing. And when I first started, I was not naive enough to think I could do this without, smoke and mirrors.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of knew that I was weak on the hosting side. Obviously, I've never done it before, right? And you're just emulating what your brain has heard over the last 20 years of your life, or
100%,
6 years of your life listening to radio. So I realized that I needed a gimmick to kind of soften the greenness, and it was video, because we started doing high def video in 2010. And that's kind of what got Guys from Queens, the network, on the map, with the fact that we were doing live high-def video radio shows daily, multiple times a day. Sometimes we had live programming for like 7 hours on a Tuesday. So there was my show, another show, boom, 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 right after each other. And I think that was the gimmick for me. And video was a necessity because I needed to stand out a little bit more than everybody else. And that's the only reason why I did it. It wasn't that I thought, video would be the answer, and to be honest, I did it the wrong way. I started doing video, and I don't do YouTube style videos, right?
Mm-hmm.
So reality is I should have probably gone in that style, but I just enjoy radio way more, the whole voyeuristic feel where there's a camera on me and you're watching me, but I'm not watching you. I'm not looking at you. And for me, that's always been the big, that's been the gimmick, where you get this peek inside of how it's being made, even before we go live, right? And I think I've caught you off guard. I tend to go live a little before, and I forget to tell people.
Yeah, I
tend to go live like 5 minutes before the show starts, because I always feel like if you're in the chat room and you're committing to tuning in, right? Because it's a lot to ask somebody.
Yep.
Not only should you enjoy my show, but now I'm doing it live. I want to give you a little bit more. I want to give you a little bit more of a peek behind the curtain, and you could kind of see, like, how we're setting up the shots and the conversation of building the show. It's something you don't really get, and I always felt that was something that I felt stood out compared to other podcasts.
No, it's actually an interesting story on how you did it, but also there's a technological aspect to it. You're a tech guy.
Yeah.
And if it was somebody else trying to do this, they wouldn't have the same advantage as you, because you're a tech guy. You do shows about the tech industry. And so if I'm looking in your room right now, I see the mixer, I see a mic. Like, how much do you think you've actually invested in doing this show?
Well, I know that the audio is the audio portion of, and by the way, this is all unnecessary, right? And I know you enjoyed this conversation, and Brian too. Whenever I talk to Brian, it ends up being more about the technology aspect.
No,
of this.
I mean,
there's a lot of people. I think a tremendous amount of the audience likes this kind of stuff, because
but also there's people who want to do this, like you do, and they're like, "How did he do it?" I'll
tell you, do not do it how I did it.
That's what I tell everybody about audio. I'm like, ask me questions on what you need to buy, because I've made so many mistakes, and you won't have to make those mistakes and waste your money.
So when we started doing this, I invested maybe like $4,000. I was like, okay, I know I want to get a good board. I know I want a decent microphone. I had enough knowledge about how audio works. So right now, for example, I think my audio is terrible right now. I need to fix it. So I could hear it in my headphones that I don't like how I sound, and I need to fix that. So I've always been a little bit meticulous about, getting the presentation right with that.
Sure.
But I probably right now, with the console and the processing, I probably have about $50,000 worth of audio alone. And a lot of the stuff you don't see, like on this rack, we use an IP-based audio system for our console. This is a Radius. It's a Axia Radius console, and it goes into this core. Everything is IP based. Like we don't do mix. It's automatic mix minusing. Everything's programmed in. It's set it and forget it, much like a radio station. So that's been a nice peace of mind to have because I don't fiddle with it. But and then the video, 2, 3, 2, 4, 6, 8. There's like another $8,000 worth of cameras, then another couple thousand of lighting, and then you got the computer that's like $6,000-$7,000 with the it's quite a few bucks. Now, do I recommend people to do it that way? Absolutely not. It's totally unnecessary because in my mind, this was going to be, and for a while, it was a production studio where we had a whole bunch of other shows going on. So, you can't see, but I got, a couch with 2 mics on this side. I got another couch with 2 mics on this side. There's another camera pointing here, another camera there. So we've kind of strayed away from the original idea of what we were doing. But if you're doing this now and you want to get into it, honestly, $100 microphone and using something like StreamYards,
right, which is what I'm using,
which is
right
what
now.
you're using, is better than 99% of the stuff that we were doing even 7 years ago.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, it's a great point. Technology evolves, and it's almost like, when you, people used to say, when you buy a car, the second you drive it off the lot, it depreciates. Yeah. And you can say something similar about technology. Like people understand now, the iPhone 11, in a year, there's going to be a new iPhone, and so that 11 in 6 months, it's kind of going to be outdated really soon. So like that is how technology works. And it's crazy because as much money as you've invested, and look, your setup, I don't watch a lot of video podcasts, but your setup is as professional as there is that I've seen. And I, some this is their living in some instances. And you can see like Adam Carolla has a studio built for his shows, right? Your video looks just as good as his does, and I'm sure he's spent even more money than yours. So there is something to say about the high quality of what you have invested, but I think it's also you just know what the hell you're doing, and that is a big part of it as well.
I also have a really honestly, I've been really lucky by having people in the audience that know more than me. So like my producer John, right, Suncast in the chat room, he's been our admin for 10 years now with the website, with the editing, with the video. He's created this like automated process that it automatically will edit my videos. It'll chop the beginning and end because he's learned how to predict how I start a show. So based on the words that I'm using and the tone, the software that he has is able to chop the beginning and the end. It's 95% accurate. Sometimes you need to go in there and manually do it. But, we have him. We have MG Geek, which is like our community organizer that's able to kind of piece things together. We got Jonathan, our producer now that does all our videos and audio clips for social media. So the team is really, like right now for Madmen, that's really the driving force behind it with all the social engagement. But for a long time, it was me hosting. And I had to learn how to do all this, and I picked it up. But I've been very lucky to have friends in media and broadcasting. I mean, this has kind of been the story of my career. And I have a lot of friends in really interesting career paths that have been able to help me, especially like with the scoops and stuff. That's all industry friends that I talk to daily. Same thing goes with podcasting. It was stand-up comics. It was audio engineers. One of my good friends, Chris Tobin, he passed away. He was the VP of engineering for CBS Radio. And this guy taught me top to bottom, mostly everything I know.
Amazing.
I'm very lucky to have been able to know these people and to help. But at the end of the day, it was a lot of convincing myself that I could pull this off, and not go back to work. Because for 10 years, I didn't go to work. This is all I did.
So if we, I kind of want to talk about where we will be as of this viewing and as of people listening to this, in a few days, we're going to be in Chicago. And when you think about those type of events, first and foremost, we're wrestling fans, so that's why we're going. But secondly, I think we're gonna do a We're Live Pal that weekend and maybe get some some guests, some special guests on that show. But also, like, do you see those now a little bit more as like networking opportunities as well, or are you just out there to hang out with your friends and have fun and watch wrestling?
I think it's a little of both. You have to have fun doing this. I just came back from Vegas, and some of it was networking, obviously, but a lot of it is I want to have fun. I want to hang out with my friends. I want to hang out with you. I want to hang out with Brian. I want to hang out with everybody that's going to be there, and to have a good time. But you could do both, and I tell people that all the time. For me, work mode is very different the way that I see it. I don't have two versions of me, where there's one that's all work driven and one that's me personally. I am who I am. So I tend to enjoy even these, work engaged events. But to be honest, I mean, to be in Chicago for that super show, it's gonna be awesome. That's why I'm doing it now. I think the show's doing awesome, but I would have gone anyway.
Yeah. So was there? I don't know. I mean, I see your YouTube numbers for the shows that you guys do. Very, very solid numbers. But was there a moment with your show, with the Madmen Show, where it flipped for you guys? Like, as far as you started to see more views, you started to see, because I think you had told me the audio version of the show was like doing crazy numbers. But from the video side, like, was there a time frame? Was it the popularity of wrestling changing? Was it you guys figured out the social? Like, what was the tipping point for Madmen becoming what it is today?
So it's funny because we just spoke about this and we were trying to put it together. Like, okay, what blew up the video? The audio show did great. Like, it was doing like 20,000 downloads a show, like prior to everything blowing up, and that was fine. Now we're in the hundreds. We're doing. I think last episode did over 100,000 downloads.
It's crazy
with every platform that we're on. So, I would say it's a combination of things. The thing that really started to change things a little bit was the fact that we started doing watch-alongs for the pay-per-views. And that was interesting because it was one of the few moments that we had for 4 or 5 hours to sit there, and it wasn't the quality of the show didn't matter. The information that we were providing didn't matter. It was more of, hey, we're going to hang out and have drinks and go nuts, and you guys could join us. And we started doing phone calls that way. So it was a community engagement, really. And then everything kind of like our social media started picking up. But you hit the nail on the head. The fact that wrestling has gotten hot again, that's really been the new eyeballs. Also, being on Observer doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
Being on F4W doesn't hurt. The fact that, I'm being every pro wrestling website is quoting me in some capacity. And I'm not saying that in a gloating way at all, because it's still surreal to me, the whole thing. But that also is a huge help. Websites like obviously Observer and F4W, Fightful, Wrestling Inc., WrestleZone. When they put a link to the show, that's a big help. These are mega sites with a lot of traffic, and one quote or one video really starts turning things over a little bit. Reddit has been a huge help also. So it's interesting because it's been more organic and less us saying like, we need to hit these goals, we need to hit these numbers. I still don't know where this ends. I don't know where the top is with this. Rich and I always say, like, we're doing this because we love doing it.
Yeah.
Second, we don't love doing it, we could, I could live my life and nobody will ever see me again.
So let's talk about the watch along thing, because I think it's an interesting idea, and I had always kind of been like, man, like, who really wants to do this, because they're gonna watch a 4-hour pay-per-view right after. Are people really gonna sit there and hang out with us while we preview the show and kind of talk about what's happening on the pre-show, and trying to it's almost in a sense it's like building interest for the show for WWE. But like, that's a long day for you.
Yeah, very.
Like, how do you find the time? You're a family man. You have a different career. This is a very passionate and successful hobby, by the way. Like, how do you and you and the guys who you work with, how do you guys find the time and the stamina to do this?
The shows are exhausting, but I sometimes feel like, and this is gonna come off wrong, but I feel like I need it. I need to do the watch along as much as the people watching it need it, because it changes the feel of the show. I always have a better time watching wrestling or anything with a group of friends.
Yes.
And that's always been the thing. I think your experience is a little different, but here's the con here, right? Here's the negative. I have to rewatch whatever pay-per-view, especially a WWE pay-per-view that's going for like 7 hours or 6 hours. I have to rewatch it the next day because generally, I mean, this has happened maybe once or twice, but generally my tone, my attitude towards the pay-per-view is always positive because I've had the best time doing it.
Sure.
You know, we're having drinks, we're ordering food, we're making jokes, we're taking phone calls. So it's a very different experience. Same thing with like going to a show. You know, I saw the criticism of SummerSlam, people saying it was a 4-hour Raw, but I had a freaking blast being in that building, and I had a very different experience. I rewatched it, and I kind of understand why some people felt that way, but
Yeah.
I think it was needed for me to kind of continue with wrestling because I kind of fell out of love again with it about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, because my personal life got busy, you know, work got busy.
Of course.
The pandemic happening really put a grinding halt to everything else. So I had all this free time to just go nuts, you know, and do like 4 or 5 shows a week sometimes and go, you know, do a 3-hour podcast instead of a 1-hour podcast. And it kind of changed everything. You know, we started having more fun, and I think the audience saw it, and it kind of trickled from there. But the watch alongs were huge for us.
You know, somebody who may have had a different experience than you in Las Vegas, Denise.
They treated her like garbage. They turned the lights off on her in the bathroom.
Yeah, her experience was she went off. She cut quite the promo on Allegiant Stadium. If you want to listen to the We're Live, pal, the last one, she cut quite a promo. Okay, so I want to talk about this new evolution of your career when it comes to wrestling, which is you mentioned people are quoting you, and now I know people who are following your Twitter very closely, waiting for you to post something, and then it immediately gets posted in my Facebook group.
I see that
for the Fight Game podcast. But it's awesome because when I see somebody, you know, of course, everyone's going to screenshot Brian. They're going to screenshot Dave, Sean Ross Sapp. He's got, you know, he's got great content. But then I see you and I go, okay, this is a level up in a, like you are now seen in the same light as those other 4 guys. And let's go back to sort of the origin story of that. The only thing that I know was there was this, you had the scoop of when NXT was moving off of Wednesdays. Was that the first one, or were there way more before then that I didn't even realize?
So I've been doing this, and this is a crazy thing. I've been doing this for years, and I've always had a rule about the shows versus me. I never wanted the shows to be about me. I wanted it to be about the shows. Up until like a year ago, I rarely posted on my Twitter. Right.
Oh, okay. So it was a social media change of strategy for you that did this.
It was. I don't care for celebrityhood in any way. I love people, but like I feel weird about it. Right. Like it's on the air. Maybe I put out a different type of person a little bit, you know, because you heighten. I'm still myself, but I'm heightening a lot of me. So I was always careful. Like I had one bad incident where some guy found out where my wife works and started sending like really like threatening messages to me, and we got the cops involved. It was a whole thing. So like after that, I was like, hey, this is kind of weird. I don't want to do that. But a former writer for WWE reached out to me one day on Facebook. And they were quite they were angry. They had just got him fired. It was the same time that Eric got released from WWE. And this person was really annoyed. And we had one mutual friend that I don't know if they went on a date or they knew each other. There was something. I had a mutual friend. And this guy at like 2:30 in the morning unloaded on Facebook Messenger and told me like a year and a half worth of storylines and just like like all this stuff, right? Pretty much all this stuff. And we mentioned it on the air, and I'm like little by little, you know, I don't want to be like, oh, and then this happened, and then this is happening. But I mentioned on the air that Sasha Banks is going to be in The Mandalorian.
Mm-hmm.
That was it. Like that, like became such a big story where I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that was a story that blew up. And then after that, it just slowly trickled. I think we had mentioned that the Ultimate Warrior was going back to WWE. They had agreed on like some sort of relationship. I think we had said Sting in 2014 or 15.
So this
I
is
think we
going
mentioned
back
Goldberg.
a long time.
Yeah, but I've always been told things. So
Yeah.
but I never posted it. I never posted it anywhere.
So then the Sasha Banks thing would have been what, last year?
Yeah, that would have been over a year ago. No, I mean she had just filmed it. So whenever her scene was filmed, that's when we announced it.
And so rather than just talk about it on the show, that's when you then posted the information to Twitter, and it kind of blew up from there.
No, I never posted it. Somebody quoted me, and it went on Reddit, and it got picked up on the Star Wars message boards. And then that's when my mind, like, something clicked. I was like, huh, they're not saying Madmen Podcast. They're saying Andrew Zarian of the Madmen Podcast. I'm like, I'm like, Rich, you mind if I start posting these on my person? He's like, no, dude, do it. So I little by little, I started posting it. But the NXT thing, like months later,
yeah,
to come back to this, the NXT thing was the first, like, okay, it's not a fluke. I think this guy maybe knows something.
Right. Okay, so there is a responsibility now that you have when you do this, because if you say it on a podcast and it turns out that it's wrong, you can just go on the podcast. Your listeners will very much forgive you. Just like, oh yeah, you know, this, I got it wrong. My bad,
change,
whatever.
Pal. Yeah.
But if you post it on Twitter, that's a much different story, because people are going to screenshot that. They're going to take that as all of a sudden they're counting, you know, how many of these is he right about? And I'm trying to find the one time when he's wrong, and then I'm going to cancel him. That's the goal of Twitter.
That really Twitter is. People. No, I have a very different stance on how the internet should be, social media should be. I even with all the benefits, right? I absolutely love it, the people that you meet, but it is a cesspool. And there are detractors out there that will constantly look to find something and hit you with it. I get those. Here's a good one. I was wrong about Cardi B being the host of SummerSlam, but she got pregnant. So you really that kind of played a,
and her song was just throughout the show
over and over again,
over and over.
So so like that would be, but I'm still like I want to be credible. Like I'm told a bunch of stuff. Like I'll give you an example. Daniel Bryan, right? Bryan Danielson. I got a message from somebody saying, "Hey, Bryan Danielson's gonna be at All Out." Okay. I was like, "You sure?" He goes, 100%. He's at All Out. Don't effing mention this to anybody. So I sat on it because I don't want this guy to get in trouble or girl to get in trouble or whatever you want to imagine this person is. I don't want them to get in trouble. So I sat on it. I did happen to see the same day. I guess it came from the same source. Other people posted it. So I was like, okay, yeah, now I'll confirm it. So there is a responsibility. And I really, you have to do it in an ethical way. I don't want to out these guys because the reality is, if let's say Tony Khan or Vince or whoever is managing a department finds out that one of their staffers is going around and telling people what's happening, that guy's gone. That woman, that girl's gone. So I do this in a very, I do it in a very different way where I try not to do it too soon. I try to get rumblings of other people maybe having some sort of knowledge of this, and then I'll do it. I did, but the Rock thing at like Survivor Series, right? That I said that I could be wrong. That could change. I took a risk. It's really super early when we mentioned it.
Sure.
But I felt confident enough based on the source that I could say this.
And what you're talking about is the idea that Survivor Series is based around 25 years after Rock's debut.
Yeah, in New York.
New York.
Yeah.
No, so when it cuts, like, who have you? You don't have to tell me who, but I'll change the question. As you were getting this information and as you were becoming this guy who had information, did you reach out to folks and go, "Hey, I didn't go to journalism school to learn how to do this. Like, am I doing this right? Like, how long should I wait? Like, did you ask people for advice to sort of figure out the ethical standard of doing this properly?"
Yeah, like I have a good idea of how to do it ethically. I have friends in media, so
Sure.
I've pieced it together over the years on, and just my personal thought of media and journalism, and a lot of that is incorporated on how I do things. But I did reach out. I believe I messaged Brian, and I also messaged Sean Ross Sapp, and I said, "Hey, just am I doing this the right way?" And I forgot who told me, but somebody's like, "Hey, listen, maybe you should." And I don't think it was Brian or Sean. I can't remember who it was. It could have been one of my friends that works for like NBC Sports or Fox Sports or something. But they were like, "Listen, don't really dump everything at the same time. You got to piece these things out." And I was like, "Okay, you know what? Maybe I'll piece it out." But then I feel crappy that I'm like holding back on stuff, like it's weird. But what I say constantly, I'm not a journalist. I'm not a journalist. I do think I'm ethical on the way that I don't report anything on health ever. The Roman Reigns, when Roman was sick, I believe I had wind that something was going on there, and it's just not something that I would ever. I don't feel comfortable talking about people's money or people's health, and those are like my two things. Like if I feel like something I'm going to say is going to harm your career or your personal life, or going to bring any kind of pain to you, I want nothing to do with it. I want this to be fun. I want this to be about, pro wrestling and make it happy and interesting. I don't put my opinion into a story if I'm quoting somebody. By the way, Garrett, I've had a lot of issues with that. And I constantly have to tell people what I'm quoting and what I'm saying is not my opinion. You want to hear my opinion, you can listen to the podcast.
Right.
You're not looking at this, like AEW Dynamite is coming to Long Island, right? 12/8, UBS Arena. I posted that Friday night. I have my thoughts on this. I have my opinions on this, but that's for the podcast.
Right.
I don't think half the people give a crap about my opinion. They follow me because they get the news. So it's a balance. I got to balance that out a little bit.
Okay. So if somebody said, "Hey, Andrew, I have an idea. I want to do something similar to you in this space. I want to create a podcast. I want to create a social media brand." We already talked about kind of, your upfront cost, but it is now a lot different on what you can actually do. Get your mic, get your hosting and you're good. But if you were to sort of get started with everything that you know right now, you're a vet. But if you were to restart, or let's say you create a new brand, let's say you're getting out of wrestling and you're going into, something else, like, what would your 2 or 3 pieces of startup advice be on getting it going? I'll say why I asked it this way. The way that you guys use Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, the syndication of your show, like, there is a strategy involved, and it's not just, I'm just throwing all this stuff up. Like, there is a clear strategy involved in how you guys use social media and your branding.
So outside of the wrestling stuff, and by the way, I really appreciate you saying it that way, because outside of the wrestling stuff, like, my background is, I don't have a formal background in anything that I do. I went to college for business. I became a college dropout. because I got a job doing some crazy stuff. Financially at like 21 years old, I was making good money. It wasn't drugs or anything. I made it seem like it's terrible, right? But I got into like the party supply business, and I would buy and sell party supply stores. So I've always had this wacky, like whatever pulls me at the moment, that's what I go to. But if I were to say one thing is my background, it's marketing.
Sure.
That's been my bridge to every job that I've ever had, including sales. And now you can kind of piece together, like, where I get information from, right? Like I have a tremendous sales background. I have a marketing background, communications background, obviously, with what I do. So, I have a financial background with running businesses. So I have 30 different perspectives going into it, but yeah, there 100% is a focus. There is when I envision what we do, this is it. I don't even think about the money with this, but I've been asked this tons of time because of the tech podcast and the popularity of it. There are 3 rules that I always tell people to follow. 1, you have to really be passionate about what you're talking about. Like, you have to really care about the subject, because if you don't, then it comes off so disingenuous. As I say that, there are children banging at my door. Yeah.
Daddy, where are you? I have to ask you a question.
So I thank God for the soundproof door. That's a new addition to the studio. I put this soundproof door so they can be screaming. I could hear them, but you can't hear them. I tell people, you have to really care about what you're talking about, because people will see right through. Joe Rogan, for all the criticism he gets, he's really passionate about all the wacky things he's into. How the water erosion on the Sphinx's leg makes it possibly, way older than people think. Like, you could talk, you're listening to him, and he goes, I'm an idiot, don't listen to me. But he's really passionate about these ridiculous subjects. Opening up your third eye and aliens and all this stuff. He's really into this stuff.
Yeah.
And I admire that in somebody when they're so into what they're talking about. And you don't have to be an expert. Like, I'm not a pro wrestling expert. I'm not a pro wrestling historian. Yeah, I love the history aspect of it, and I do maybe know more, but I don't label myself with anything. It's just something I'm really into.
Yeah.
You have to be passionate. 2, don't do it for the money. Don't start it as a hobby and make it blend into something. And the 3rd is key. If you're consistently decent at doing what you're doing, you will be recognized for it. Don't be the best. You don't have to be the best. You don't have to be the greatest. You don't have to be second. But if you're consistent and your quality is consistently decent, and your visuals, and it's just something that people look at and they say, okay, you know what? These guys have been doing this for a while. It looks good. It sounds good. The information is good. I'm going to check them out. That's it. Those are the 3 keys. And I think people try to do too much too soon, and they fizzle out. I've been doing this 10 years. If you told me when I started doing a wrestling podcast and he said, listen, Andrew, you'll be able to do something cool with this, but it's going to take you about 9 or 10 years. Would I have committed all the time and the effort and the money and the hours doing it? Probably not.
Okay, this question is mostly for me.
Okay.
Maybe not for the audience.
This is a Curtis Sliwa shirt, and he's running for mayor. This is not an endorsement of him. I just find him to be a ridiculous person, so I did buy a shirt. Is that the question?
No, it's not. So we just heard, you just mentioned kids knocking at the door. You're a married man. How long have you been married?
Together 16 years, married for 13.
So married, you guys have been living this life for quite a while. You have the children. How do you balance the family with this crazy passion? And, part of it is your wife just being like, yeah, you can go do what you want to do. And I'm sure she's got her own thing that she wants to do. And you guys have, this really good chemistry and appreciation for each other's interests. But like, how do you juggle that whole thing?
I have a really patient and understanding wife. I think that's the key. It's our schedules are really great. Like, my wife, she's an educator. She very smart. I mean, you talk to me and then you talk to my wife, and I'm an idiot. She has a doctorate, and she's really put together and organized and very disciplined with what she does and how she does it. Me, on the other hand, I'm a freaking tornado, but I think that balances us out. We've just been able to create our schedules has kind of fallen in line. I take the kids to school in the morning. She goes to work. I come back. I get ready. I work later, so I could do my podcast in the morning. I leave. We record Madmen at 10:30 in the morning most days on Thursdays, so it's early. Most people aren't recording a podcast at 10 o'clock in the morning.
And
but that's the time that we can do it.
For me, it was at
7 o'clock.
7:30, and I'm driving my stepdaughter to school, and I'm like, "Oh, these guys are live," and I just throw it on my phone while we're going to school.
Yeah. So, my kids are in school, so that helps. But I also have a lot of help. My father lives with me, so he's able to help out, and my brother's been staying with us because of COVID, and he's moving. This is why we're recording, at the time that we're doing it today. My brother's moving to Austin, so he's been able to help out. But our schedules has always kind of blended well. I also have flexible hours. Like, I don't have set hours with any of my clients or anything. So, like a Tuesday when we're recording, I'm generally at home, except for last week when I had to be in Manhattan. Mondays I could come home at 3:30 in the afternoon if I need to. But there are days like Thursdays and Wednesdays I'm not home till 3:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
So it's a chaotic mess that works for us, I guess. But I also have a very understanding wife that understands that my career is not this traditional, path. And, I have these really nutty nights sometimes, and it's just how it works.
Okay, so the evolution of what you're currently doing, Madmen is doing great. I imagine there could be, in the future, I would say, more opportunities for you to do more in wrestling as your name gets more out there, as people are, searching for your tweets and stuff. I mean, and, people reaching out to you just in general, going like, "Hey, you have a voice. I need to get my message through." And now I'm coming to you. But like, if somebody said, "Hey, would you want to work actually in professional wrestling? Would you want to work for WWE?" That kind of thing. Like, is that something that you're interested in, or do you just enjoy what you're doing now and you just want to keep iterating and evolving on what you're doing now?
That's like, I'm gonna have the same conversation that my wife and I had last night, because that's something that she brings up all the time, that I tend to take things that I very much love and enjoy, and I turn it into jobs, and then I end up hating it. And I've done this so many times in the 16 years that we're together, where, I love going out. Like, I love nightlife and I love going out, and I made it into a job, and now I hate it. I hate being out. I want to be home. I'm tired already. But I mean, for someone that hates it, I'm out. Like last night I was at the Mets game, and I was at, I'm always out doing something. But like, deep down inside, oh yeah, I want to do something in wrestling, right? Like, that's the answer. Like, but in reality, I'm 37, and I have a really good career.
Yeah.
Like, what financially, like, I barely make any money from the podcast at this point. I stopped doing ads. I haven't sold an ad in months because I'm enjoying it a little bit too much, and I don't want to hurt it a little bit. Like, I've kind of changed with that. And my career, my career is fantastic. It would take a lot for me to be convinced to give this up. Like, it would have to be a lot of not even financially, but I mean, just the incentives would have to be really putting my life into a better, like, I want to retire in 10 years. Like, that's my goal. Like, I'll always work, but I want to be financially at the point that if I don't work, I'm okay. And I know that's a crazy thing to say, but by 50, I mean, I'm 37 now. By 50, I want to be retired. I don't think leaving my career now and going to a WWE would be able to do that for me. I'm not like an on-air talent. I mean, I could do it, but I wouldn't be good at play-by-play. I've done it before. I've done commentary. I would have to probably be hired on the business end of things, which, not gonna say that I haven't been offered something, but the conversations I've had, it would change, it would disrupt my life, and I wouldn't want to do that to my family.
Now, if there was a human being running WWE whose name was not Vince McMahon, because we know how much of a stickler he is for doing things a certain way, like the thing that I would look at you for, and I don't think WWE takes advantage of this nearly enough, because everything to them is TV. Now they have good social media numbers. I don't know if their content, their social media content, is necessarily all that intriguing to me. But where I think someone with a mind like yours would fit is if they decided to, I think they're a part of like Endeavor's podcast network or whatever, but let's figure that thing out and actually make interesting content. Yeah, outside of the New Days show, which I find entertaining. I'm not sure what other audio. I think Corey Graves has a show, but he's so in that WWE umbrella that I wouldn't find it too interesting. But like, let's like actually make intriguing content. You know, your knowledge of producing and of marketing, like I would actually throw you right in that. Like, Andrew, make intriguing content for us that feels organic and that doesn't feel so blueprint WWE, because I don't know. I just feel like you would have the mind for that.
Well, it's funny. I had a conversation with someone not from WWE, from one of the networks. 4 nights ago, we went out to dinner, and it's been that question I've gotten probably like 20 times in the last like 3 months. And I think that's what people see. If you don't know like what I do for my regular career and like my lifestyle, the automatic thing is like, oh, so you want to get hired there, or you want to go to, like, it's always WWE. Nobody ever says like, do you want to get hired at AEW? I wouldn't mind an offer, guys. Tony, you know, I know that you're pals with Tony Khan. Like, I wouldn't mind like a conversation at least to see like, okay, what can we do? But the position that WWE, I mean, AEW right now is on the biggest role of their, I mean, this is their the company making role that they're on, right? And outside of the wrestling, like talking about perception, which is a huge part, the perception of what AEW is. I'm not saying that it's true or it's false, but the perception is that they're a really hot product. WWE, on the other hand, is on a decline financially. They're doing gangbusters, and they do. I mean, listen. Being at that show for SummerSlam, it was like an aha moment. Like the bell finally went off in my head of all the things that I've been saying for years, and that's WWE is no longer professional wrestling. This is the carnival. This is the circus. This is exactly what he has told us for 30 years, and that's sports entertainment. This is what sports entertainment is. You have a DJ to kick it off. You have, celebrities. You have endorsement deals. You have the toys, the T-shirts, the fan interaction. They're doing that better than anybody. Like, I honestly, they do it better than the NFL. Way better than the NBA. There's no company in the world that is able to take this thing of wrestling at the core and kind of hide all of it and make it this into, the hoopla of the event. It's actually remarkable. The one thing that they don't do, and I don't understand this, is have somebody like director of digital strategy or digital communication. And all it has to be is a team of people that essentially fight the narrative, right? Like, WWE is not cool, but look at the cool stuff that we're putting out. They're an incubator of ideas that are non-traditional to what you'll see from them on TV, but you'll see it online. And they've tried it so many times, and you know what? It gets mucked. The whole thing. It becomes way too polished. If you had I'm not saying Madmen, right? I'm not even saying that we're on the level. Let's say another pro wrestling podcast that's entertainment based. that talks about the other guys sometimes, or they talk about you guys, but they kind of break that fourth wall down a little bit and you talk behind the scenes. Wouldn't that be like, wait a minute, what are they doing? This is different.
So this is why the WWE Network was one of the biggest failures, because they had so much opportunity to do exactly what you said.
By the way, everything I said was an idea. Like, they started with that idea, with the podcasts, with everything else. Like, they've been wanting to do a podcast for 10 years, and they can't break down that idea that, okay, you know what? We're watching General Hospital. No, I was going to talk about Susan Lucci. Right? Susan Lucci. We're watching. I don't know why Susan Lucci. That poor woman. She finally got her daytime Emmy. Right? She finally got it. All of my children. So you're watching this, and you know that it's a little corny, and you know that the acting's not great, right? But imagine if they just never said, like, okay, this is not real, right? Like, these people aren't real. They're not allowed to talk like real people and be critical about their work when it's not good. I find it, I don't know why I went with daytime soaps. That was a really bad reference, but I would feel like we like the humanity in these people, and I think that's the interesting thing about AEW, because they feel the characters, and I'm sure I'll get yelled at for this, right? I connect with a Jon Moxley looking at me, and like, he's sweaty, he's not polished anymore. But he is, and you know what I mean? Like, visually, he comes off unpolished because the lights aren't as bright on him, and he's not, looking at the crowd and standing sideways and look. When you remove all that and he's talking to me, I'm like, oh crap, this man is connecting with me right now, and I'm very interested in what he's doing. I feel like these are opportunities that they don't take. And I don't understand why. I mean, I do understand why, right? Because they're Marvel Comics now. Wolverine's not going to break that fourth wall and look at you and be like, hey, by the way, and give you a wink and a nod. They stay in character, but the reality is that's not what wrestling has ever been. We've now, they are no longer wrestling. They are something else that, you know what, may not, in 5 to 10 years, may be something I don't care to watch at all anymore, but my kids are surely going to love it.
Well, it's like you take an idea of a product, and then you license the hell out of it, and you figure out how to get the most money out of this idea. And you're right, the traditional understanding of pro wrestling, which, by the way, was always about selling something to fans, but WWE has actually utilized the TV opportunity to really change pro wrestling to be something of a different product. But so here's my idea. Stern is our guy. I unfortunately don't listen to him anymore because I don't have the satellite radio thing. But Stern, every day from a certain time on the air, goes for, I don't know, how long does he go now? Does he go still 3 or 4 hours?
He's doing like, he's still doing 3-4 hours. So, I mean, when he's working, he took off the whole summer. So
what a guy! Well, what a gig! Jeez.
What a
legend!
At this point, I think the show's terrible now.
Oh, is it really?
It's so it's unlistenable for me.
Wow,
it's gotten so bad. But I got to tell you, he's still freaking Howard Stern, and this guy created whatever I'm doing right now is because of him. So you can't knock the guy too much.
So WWE, here's the idea: Peacock, whatever, get someone like Andrew, run a morning show from 6 to 8, from 6 to 9, whatever, stream it live on Peacock in a studio on Monday. Maybe you're talking about the pay-per-view from the day before. On Tuesday, you're always talking about Raw. You're focusing on Raw, talking about all the angles. You can do this Monday through Friday. This is what the NFL Network does. This is what ESPN does. You have these talking head shows. Make it good, though. You have these shows which create hype and content that you can also put on your social media, but you're basically creating the dialogue daily for pro wrestling fans. And I think there's just so much opportunity out there
Tremendous.
that they don't do. I mean, AEW doesn't currently have a network that they're doing, but they could utilize YouTube if they wanted. Maybe YouTube is not the right place for them right now, but like let's figure out how to make wrestling, because wrestling is every day, every week. Like there's no off season, so you already have that part. The NBA and the NFL, they have off seasons, so that's why they have to create these artificial things for people to talk about. Oh, we're releasing the schedule, and that's a week of content. Oh, the draft is coming up, and that's 2 months of content. You can do this with pro wrestling in a way that I think the one thing missing, right, is the casual fan base that we may never get back. But if you give people a reason to check in from time to time, and if I know all of a sudden, wow, Becky Lynch came back to SummerSlam, Brock Lesnar came back to SummerSlam,
I want to hear why. What happened?
And they're your guest on Monday.
But not in character. I wouldn't keep them. You know what I mean? Like
they're going to be on Raw. They're going to be on SmackDown. They're going to do their interview. But you bring them in and go, huh, you're back. What's up? And then they talk about why they were gone. Oh, yeah, Becky had a kid. Now she feels comfortable. And then she goes and does her thing as the man on SmackDown. So there's opportunity there that I think that they're not taking.
No, I mean, what you said is just traditionally how everybody has always wanted to do it, right? And we saw that kind of with The Walking Dead when they did the Talking Dead. I mean, we've seen that networks have done host shows, but again, very manufactured, right? But with radio, like that's why I love radio. You don't have to follow a script. And one thing for Madmen that I like doing even more than talking wrestling, it's just the random offshoot conversations. We don't keep it about wrestling, and that's something, by the way, you and Dave, when, obviously I've listened to Brian and Dave for 20 years.
Yep.
When you started doing the show with Dave, I was like, you know what? I kind of like Brian and Dave because that's what I know.
They're
right?
they're the best duo.
And then I listened. This was like, I think you had done it like 2-3 weeks. And I listened. And I was like, wait a minute. I like the delivery. It's a little different. Like, I like your, just the matter of fact on how you present a question. It like kind of, I mean, now I'm going to confess my love for you, right? This is the moment. This is it. Unobserve this. But there's certain things that people do that kind of like tickles my brain a little bit. And I like that. Also, the fact that you could go into a ridiculous conversation about roller derby and about the National, talking about that. Or you could go into an IATA conversation or bring up names from football or baseball. These are things that kind of, you fall into a trance when you're listening to something sometimes. And these are the things that pulls you back. And Howard was brilliant at that.
Mm-hmm.
The way I do live reads, I follow the Howard way of not giving a crap about the script and just totally going off the rail. Nobody did that before him. The in-between, we're in the middle of a subject, and I'll just stop, and I'll say, hey, Rich, and I'll ask him something absurd that has nothing to do with wrestling. That's a Howard thing.
Yeah.
So you constantly have to shuck and jive a little bit, and it's really a boxing match. You got to predict where you're going next. You're dancing along, and it becomes boring after a while. And I think that's a big thing with WWE and their podcast. Corey Graves, for example, is one of the most talented broadcasters that company has ever had.
He was a really good announcer.
Very good.
Until he became a caricature of what he was doing. When he was doing it early on, he was very fresh, but then he had to become a character. And it's almost like you were doing Jesse Ventura when you weren't trying to do Jesse Ventura, and now you're trying to do Jesse Ventura, and you're just a turnoff to me.
Well, yes, I mean, if I went to you and I'm your producer, right? I'm running this product that you're broadcasting, and I go, hey, listen, be more Jesse, even though you were. Like, if I came to and I'm like, hey, listen, Garrett, you're doing a great job with Dave, but you need to up the Howard a little bit more. Now,
yeah,
I'm
then
going,
I'm not
hey
myself.
Now.
Then I'm not myself.
Then I'm starting the show going, hey now, and doing the same bits, and now you're not organic anymore. It just totally went into a whole different direction. I think if that position that I've thought of existed in that company and they embraced some of the negatives, it would be a very different perception. Would the product be different? Probably not, but the perception of it would be different. Brock Lesnar returning, that's a tremendous moment. The fans should not be upset at that. They should understand why he's there.
Well, remember, I think Brock Lesnar, gosh, this had to be like 5 years ago now. He does a thing on ESPN, and Michelle Beadle basically says, "Oh, sir, now you've resigned," and that's sports. That is sports. And so Brock was, Brock is Brock. You're not going to get him to jump for anything, but he was about as, I guess, normal Brock as you're going to get in that scenario. And I think that kind of thing, WWE retweeted the hell out of that thing, pushed the hell out of the thing. Oh, we're on ESPN. Like, that's the thing. You are your own universe. Create that in the universe, but make it real and make it organic and not so contrived, because what we get on Monday and Thursday and Friday and the pay-per-views, that can be contrived. That's what, that's what that's for. But, do something, I don't know. I guess that they would just feel like maybe talent would kind of go off the cuff and say things that they wouldn't want them to say. But,
yeah. And
but
that's
still,
they had it, right? They had exactly what you were saying. And that was their Twitch streams.
I never watched them.
Like AJ, I watch a couple of AJ Styles' stuff or Randy's, and it wasn't a lot of wrestling, but when there was wrestling, your ears perked up a little bit, and they were able to create like this nice little community of their fans, and they're growing it to something else, right? They're not just growing their wrestling following, they're growing it with people that, like, maybe they're a casual wrestling fan, and now they see that he's on there, but they're more of a gamer.
Yeah.
These guys are going to be interested in maybe seeing them live.
Mm-hmm.
Just embracing that other side. I don't know. It's interesting. The evolution of that company has become the thing that my brain is focused on now. When you see all the changes being implemented on the corporate side, they're becoming more of a Marvel Comics and less of a WWF.
Mm-hmm.
That's really that's where it goes.
All right, so this upcoming week, we're going to record We're Live Pal on Tuesday. Then we're going to be in Chicago. I know you guys, your Madmen Show will be up, and then like literally the next day, you're going to be out in Chicago. And then in Chicago, like I said, we're going to try to record a show, which will be different. It'll have a little bit of a different dynamic because we'll all be there in person. But look, I've said this on We're Live Pal, part of the fun of doing this and being on a network like Wrestling Observer F4W is like meeting the people who listen. And like it still trips me out when I hear somebody reach out to me and just go, "Oh, I heard it when you said this." Now and it stops me. I'm like, what are they talking about? They listen to the podcast or whatever. So, I definitely, am down to meet people and say hi and engage. Like, that's the fun part of this for me, is to actually engage with people and hang out. So but hey man, thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it. I know you're a busy guy, but this kind of stuff, this kind of conversation for me is just like, it's my favorite kind of conversation. So
mine too, because obviously it's wrestling related, but there's so many other factors that come into play. Listen, like I said, I love doing this. I'm having so much fun doing this. As a kid reading the Observer, and to now to be like, I'm on the website, like in like a nice featured spot.
Wait, you've met Dave in person?
I've never met Dave. No.
Oh, so you'll meet him in person this weekend then?
We've sent like I think we've emailed a couple times. I emailed him like, oh God, like 20 years ago for something, and he responded. I can't even remember what it was. And you know what? That probably kept me listening to the show, which is interesting to think about. But no, I never met that. I met Brian, but that's about it. And I think I met Tony.
Yeah. No, and then
no, I never met Tony.
You've met?
Yeah. No, you know what? Denise and I did not meet in person.
No, so that's another one.
I didn't. I think Sean Ross Sapp hit her.
Oh, hit her from you?
Yeah. I did go nuts on one of the shows, and I said I'm gonna roll her up into a ball and just kick her across the arena. So maybe she hid.
All right, so we'll be doing stuff in Chicago. That'll be fun. All right, no, thanks for doing this again. Really appreciate your time. Appreciate hanging out here. But yeah, so for Andrew, I'm Double G. We'll see you when we see you. Peace out.